welcome. You are listening to Cake Over Keto, your non-diet podcast that stands up against diet culture so you can make peace with food and eat the goddamn desserts without anxiety and guilt. If you experience all-consuming food thoughts, if you feel out of control around food, if you have a loud inner critic, this is your safe space for the next 20-ish minutes, free from any assumptions and judgment. I'm Mel Wakeman, registered nutritionist, intuitive eating practitioner, non-diet counsellor and lover of mince pies. I specialise in disordered eating and recovering from chronic dieting, body dissatisfaction and eating disorder recovery, all through a weight-inclusive lens. This is episode 17, Food and the Festive Season. This is about how to navigate Christmas and, to be honest, any other holiday season with an eating disorder or disordered eating. Episodes are normally released every 2 weeks, although the next one, that'll be episode 18, will be in 3 weeks as I'm having a little bit of a break over Christmas. You can, however, still listen to all the other episodes if you need some gentle food and body reminders during what is probably the noisiest, most triggering time of the year. And I also have plenty of helpful content over on Instagram. And can I just say, Cake Over Keto is not just for people who have a diagnosed eating disorder or who know they experience disordered eating, something that there is no standard diagnostic criteria for anyway, and it's really hard to get diagnoses anyway. I just don't find labels always that helpful, especially when it comes to eating and health. And the last thing I want you to think is, I'm not sick enough or I don't qualify to listen to this or to get help. My point being, if you find food stresses you out or you just feel weird around food, feel free to come and hang around. So go grab a cushion and a cozy spot. What's coming up in this episode is right around the corner. Okay, in this episode, I'm going to get down to the nitty-gritty of taking care of your needs over the next few weeks. And let's face it, this is an intense time of year. It's kind of a diet-filled media shit show out there. And if you're feeling like you just want to go and hide under the duvet until it's all over, you are not alone. So yeah, this episode is not just for Christmas. It's any holiday that centers around food because it can feel both terrifying and exhausting at the same time. Just something to be got through with as little involvement as possible. And really, I'm here to help you find some of the joy that can exist during this period of time. Because feeling like all the eyes are on you, distancing yourself from the people and the conversation, as well as the food, can make this a really stressful time for everyone involved. So let's put a game plan in place. One that helps to remove your attention from your eating disorder or your eating problems, that takes the focus away from the food and helps you to be present with your friends and family, the ones you want to get along with anyway. Now, there are going to be 3 kind of separate parts to this episode because one, we need to talk about getting prepared. So let's put a strategy together to help you manage the increased volume and variety of foods and to help you be more centered. Number 2, let's look at ways to navigate the tricky thoughts and feelings. So we're going to look at how to interrupt any unhelpful thought processes and what to do when the overwhelm or if the overwhelm hits. And number 3 is, well, what's Christmas without the eye rolling but well-meaning relatives? Food and diet talk can be problematic because it's sort of the thing that everyone has an opinion on. And when we get perhaps different generational beliefs coming together, man, that can be hard. So I'll share some diplomatic ways to manage this. And then, of course, you've got the pick and mix at the end, and I'll be signposting you to some other helpful resources. My aim here is to not make this festive season a massive deal. Let's take one day at a time, or even one step at a time. I want to help you feel empowered, so don't go anywhere. Back in just a second. Okay, let's get prepared. Now, even if you're celebrating in someone else's house, you still get a say as to when you're going to get there, when you're going to kind of show up, and what you might want to get involved with. And I know it's easy to kind of get sucked along and think you don't have a say, but you really do. And it definitely helps, I think, to have activities that don't focus on food. So have or take your favorite games, maybe create a watch list of films or a TV box set you could kind of get involved with, or look at nearby walking options. And at home or not, I recommend you also have someone who can check in with you and support you if necessary. Someone you trust, someone you feel safe with, who gets you and hopefully kind of gets you and understands your eating disorder, or at least knows that you have one. Get them to sit near you, and you might want to give them the heads up in advance about what to look for in you that shows you're struggling, and also maybe what comments made by others might be unhelpful, so that they can help field and redirect some of those challenging conversations that might arise. And this might be particularly needed if you're meeting new people, a new partner, or friends, family, for example. It's like we get invited to different events over the festive period. So these are all kind of relevant tips for these sorts of situations. Now, some of my clients have sometimes created a safe word that they can use, like a secret signal between them and their support person, whether that's them there physically or they're on their phone, if things become too much. And I think this can be really important with perhaps bigger gatherings, so that your support person can step in to help you, because you don't have to do this on your own. Now, I find large gatherings rather awkward and rather exhausting. I can get quite overwhelmed and I can become kind of almost introverted. So what can be helpful is to write down a list of things to talk about. And this may sound kind of over the top or weird, but when your brain is elsewhere, when you're in that midst of kind of that all-consuming eating disorder or eating problem voice, when your brain is anxious, your logical thinking part of your brain can kind of get pushed to the back. So maybe pop a list in your phone or on a piece of paper in your back pocket or your bag of, easy topics. It might include the weather, but maybe if you know who is going to be there, who you're going to meet, there may be things that you might be able to think beforehand when you're in a place of calm that, you might want to have an engaging conversation about. And I think with these situations, really go with the intention of listening to who you're going to be conversing with. I think showing up for conversations can really help to displace the eating disorder voice and that associated anxiety. And it also limits the opportunities for your eating disorder voice to convince you to kind of go and talk to them later, in which case it never happens, or maybe to isolate with it because apparently it says you don't belong with others. So be mindful how manipulative sometimes that voice can be. Now, I know talking to family or certainly to new people about your eating can feel really difficult. I think especially as an adult when the dynamics are more tricky. And I get you don't want to make it a big deal, to make anyone worry, and you might worry what they will think. And like, will it make it more awkward if they know? Will it draw more attention to myself? Now, when and whatever you choose to tell people is your decision, okay? And certainly I'm not expecting you to open up your soul to new people. But I think being really honest with yourself and your close, trusted family members can be really important. And having their support can definitely help your recovery. I think sometimes we try to convince ourselves that other people won't notice or they don't know that we might have an eating problem. And to be honest, they usually do. Now, you may find creating a meal guide, depending on the type of eating disorder, eating problem that you have, a meal guide can be helpful. I've been working with several of my clients over this last week, looking at putting together some kind of meal, food or snack options. And sometimes that may include serving sizes to help them to make easier decisions, to select foods in the event their eating disorder gets too loud, because it can get too loud in telling you what to eat or how much to eat. Now, that meal guide or plan doesn't need to be rigid, and I'm really open and encourage you to act when you hear your own voice about maybe what you need or want at the time of eating. And it is absolutely acceptable to go with that instead. Okay, I know that plan can sometimes give you that security, but it's also a time to maybe challenge yourself and trust your body with its instincts in terms of what it might actually feel like. And you might well feel better including or taking some of your safe food along if they are important and they are what you have as part of your kind of approach to eating, whether it's for the meals or for snacks, to help limit the overwhelm. And I really want you to remember that, okay, Christmas dinner, it kind of has huge pressures and expectations that surround it, but it really is just another meal. So there are no rules, even though there may well be cultural influences and traditions. But when it comes to you and your recovery, there are no rules that say what is supposed to go together on the plate or be eaten together. Okay. Right. Next up, how do we navigate these tricky feelings and thoughts that might emerge? One way to support yourself is to anticipate the runaway thoughts and unhelpful narrative that can typically show up when you feel out of your depth. And doing this can feel awkward, and this is where your body's protective mechanisms come in, because you don't want to think about the uncomfortable. But this can be really helpful, because the anxious brain often goes into catastrophizing, and that's where the panic can ensue. So maybe reflect back on difficult eating experiences you've had before. You know, what has happened when you've felt triggered or you've found your eating disorder voice get louder? So do you know your triggers? And these commonly can be, you know, new situations, changes in your routine and habits, unfamiliar food, and a triggering comment, of course, are all quite common. And knowing when they might arrive means you can prepare somewhat. So it's more of a, oh, there you are. I thought you show up when that maybe critical overthinking thought comes in, rather than, I know it's preferable to try and ignore the possibility, but then we're more likely to feel thrown off course when they do emerge. So in that anticipation, you're going to be in a better position to kind of think, I want to stop that thought. It gives you a choice. It gives you an option. So literally you could say, stop in your head, or shh, or not now. It could also be a piss off, but, you know, generally the things we might say to others if we need or want them to stop saying something. So we can use this approach with the thoughts inside our head, and that can be really helpful if those thoughts are intrusive, unkind, and unhelpful. So the aim of what's called thought stopping isn't to suppress your emotions and thoughts, because we know that's unhelpful, but it gives you the opportunity to do one of two things. One is to temporarily push aside the distressing thought so you can stay mindful and remain more in the present moment. Or it gives you the option to reframe the thought in that moment and incorporate a positive slant to it. So putting aside the thought until you're in a more appropriate place to reflect and process and maybe find acceptance is not ignoring it. It's not pushing it away forever. But here you're getting to choose when the time is right, which is a really empowering action. And you might find moving to somewhere else helps this alongside the, right, I'm not doing this now. So you could nip to the loo, or, you could pet a dog or a cat, or you could offer or move to clear up, just to kind of change the scene. And reframing the thought is about finding an alternative way to look at the situation, something that we can sometimes struggle with when the eating disorder voice is around. And this reframing invites you to add accuracy into the thought, because remember, not everything you think is true. Eating disorders are kind of experts at distorting thoughts. And then add some positivity. So, for example, if your eating disorder voice is saying something critical, insert anything you like that you've experienced, your reframe could be, stop. I am not doing this now. Yeah, even though I'm struggling right now, it doesn't mean that I'm failing. I'm actually doing really well. And this helps teach the mind to recognize the strengths in each of these situations. And yes, it takes practice, but again, writing little notes in terms of tips and reminders and actions to help you navigate these difficulties can be really helpful. Reframing can also be made much easier if you have maybe some supportive statements or mantras or affirmations with you ready to go, so already written out. So often I've given my clients lists. You may well want to, and if you want to get in touch, I can happily send you some. My clients have also used cutlery with statements that are stamped onto them. Things like, you've got this, you're brave, keep going. They've written things on notepaper or little cards, or even on their arm or their hand, to remind them to keep going and how strong they are. I'll talk more about this in the pick and mix at the end. But also know, if it all feels too much, it's okay to step away. Take a breather, do what you need to do. And this is where planning in some regular quiet time, or at least a different activity that gives you some headspace, so you have the opportunity to ground and center yourself, can be really helpful. So maybe have a podcast in mind you could listen to, like a gentle distraction, or some guided breath work or meditation. Maybe you just go and find a wall to put your legs up against, or plan to step outside and take a physical breath. Okay, those well-meaning relatives. We've probably all got one. Maybe that one who carries that sort of air of superiority, accompanied with an acute lack of sensitivity that makes you question if recovery is really worth it. And they may never really get it or get you. And whether your family makes derogatory comments, they dismiss you, or they make you feel at fault, it's really important you find ways to protect your emotional space, your emotional health, so that you can continue to make the healthiest decisions for yourself, the things that you need to do. So it might mean looking at ways to further prioritize your needs, because your needs matter more than anything else right now. Looking at ways to process bubbling emotions, ways to release any energy and emotions safely rather than perhaps explosively, and also to think about how to grow your support network. And if people do make derogatory or unhelpful comments, know it is absolutely okay not to challenge them. If you're feeling really triggered, the likelihood is that you could kind of go into a spiral if you start giving more of your time and energy, and particularly if you're feeling very anxious or in a state of panic, it may not be helpful for you to do that. If you feel, however, that you want to and have the energy and capacity to, do it. Maybe write down some statements in advance, particularly if you've thought about what certain people might say based on your experience before, so that you have a framework about what you want or need or should say. But also make time to vent to your safe person, or at least have your journal to hand, maybe afterwards, and that could be the following day. And yeah, it might be time to consider family therapy. But also know if you need to exit the situation, do it. Family dynamics can be really complicated, and sometimes they can be toxic. And those who are unfortunate to reside in an environment that is sabotaging, please remember or know that there are people who can and want to help you stay safe and focus on getting better. And I'm a real big believer that family can be anything you want it to be. And for some of us, we feel closer to the people that we choose to keep in our lives rather than the people we inherit by proxy. And remember, no matter how hard this situation can feel, you're choosing recovery. And you could check out episode 14, which is about the ups and downs and doubts of recovery, for more on what that looks like. That you are strong and brave, and whatever comes your way, you have the power to choose what happens next. Right, it's time for the pick and mix in a moment, so don't go anywhere. Right, I have 3 little nuggets you might find helpful in helping yourself and helping others help you during any holiday season, okay? First one, Lana's Basket. It is a lovely little small business. It is the home of eating disorder and mental health recovery cutlery. This is something I mentioned earlier in the podcast. So it's founded by Elle and her husband Grant, and she hand stamps great quality stainless steel cutlery, nice fork spoons. And she also offers a really lovely range of motivational and sweary cutlery, as well as shoe tags, key rings, and more. And I have a number of clients who have found using cutlery really helpful during challenging meal times. They will also custom make cutlery with your own slogans and sayings. So if you go to lanasbasket.com, there'll be a link in the show notes. That could be something worth looking at. Number 2 is how to help someone with an eating disorder. It's a book, a practical handbook written by Dr. Pamela McDonald, and it is for anyone supporting a friend or family member. And it provides really kind of easy to read, succinct, practical advice and tools, many of which center around communication that can be really challenging. And it also provides a really compassionate insight into how eating disorders work and how they think. So it's something that I recommend to the family members of my clients, and it kind of gives them something really constructive and positive to focus on too, a way in which they're feeling that they can contribute and help. Another option is that Beat offer their POD, which stands for Peer Supported and Online Development. They have an online learning platform. It's at beateatingdisorders.org. It's under their kind of training for parents and carers. Again, there'll be a link in the show notes. And I've numerous times I recommended their Developing Dolphins course, for example, and that's a free series of 5 workshops for anyone caring for someone with anorexia or bulimia. Again, really helpful to give you insight into how eating disorders work, and how you can work with someone that may be suffering with one. And the third little nugget is a blog that is on my website from weightnutrition.com, and it's called Dealing with Diet Talk. And it gives you a number of retorts that you may feel you want to have in your back pocket or have in your arsenal if you are finding it difficult to navigate some of the conversations, which can be really, really intense. And I think many people, even though they may be aware of an eating problem, are completely oblivious of maybe the impact of their words. This is where we look at how pervasive diet culture can be. And when we think about disordered eating behaviors and how much they're normalized in society, many people really don't or are not aware of the potential harm that they can cause or what it's really reflecting. So again, that might be helpful. The link was in the show notes. So here we go. That's it for this episode and for 2022, my friends. thank you for joining me and for listening to me and supporting me through this venture that began back in April of this year. I have loved doing this podcast. Thank you for Monkey Pants Productions for all their support and help too. I am, of course, carrying on. The next episode will be on the 13th of January, and I'm coming back with a bullshit buster, basically. I want to unpack the whole new year, new you. I read it in the Daily Mail, so it must be due twaddle, basically. I suppose seriously, January can feel extremely heavy and many people feel very vulnerable. So I'll be providing some much needed reassurance and guidance if you need it. But then if you want to get in touch in the meantime, you can email me your thoughts and questions to mel@wakemannutrition.com or come find me on Instagram. And I'm also on TikTok as Cake Over Keto. Thank you again, and I will see you next time. In the meantime, take care of yourself. Know that you are enough. Your best is always enough. It's more than enough. I'll see you next time. Thank
you. This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.